I was in the Sea organization for 14 years. There were many similar crimes that I knew of that were covered up, and that was just the practice of Scientology. I didn't even think to call 911 when they were trying to kidnap me and bring me back.
The type of work that you were doing was instrumental in you being invited to be an expert witness in the Danny Masterson trial.
It was tough. Nobody wants to go up against $1 billion cult just for the heck of it.
Nothing was done about it when they reported it. And of course, these are just the people that we know about. It's absolutely horrendous. It's disgusting. When you start unpeeling the layers of this and the behavior patterns and the friendship groups and who's involved with what, it is really quite scary.
You know, boy, you want to judge somebody by their actions, go read that letter and see what you think about Ashton Kutcher after that.
The story hasn't ended there by any stretch of the imagination. I am really happy to have the lovely Claire Headley back on my channel today. Now, Claire and her husband Marc have got a website, Blown for Good, and a YouTube channel called Blown for Good. And Claire, you were born and bred into Scientology, there for 30 years, had a dramatic escape, have had lots and lots of sharing that you've been doing since you've left Scientology. When you were on last time, we really delved deep into your background there and what it was like growing up in Scientology and the dramatic, I still haven't quite got over that, circumstances of yours and Marc's escape. So I will leave the link for the interview for that below. If anyone hasn't listened to that, please do after this. But first of all, how are you doing?
I'm good, Catherine. Thank you so much for having me back. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well, but the heavens have just opened here. You know what it's like because you were born in England. 1 minute it's sunny, the next minute it's pouring with rain. So suddenly the heavens have opened. So if you hear lots of banging on the roof, that's just the heavy rain, I hope. If it's nothing else.
Yeah, being born in Manchester, I always remember that if there wasn't rain for 2 weeks, it was a drought.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's what we like. Here in Britain, we talk about our cups of tea and our weather. And
yes,
but
and everybody has an umbrella at all times, right?
Well, I don't anymore. That's the trouble, and I really need one. So, but we've got a lot to talk about today because you have got so much experience from what you've been through. And as I said, please, anyone that didn't watch our first interview, look at the link below and go and watch that after this one because it's fascinating. But a couple of things I really wanted to talk about today is one, your experiences having left Scientology, because the story hasn't ended there by any stretch of the imagination. And
sorry, not to cut you off, but in many respects, that's where the story began.
Yeah, well, let's start there then, because, you know, leaving was an absolute nightmare anyway, which says a lot about the organization, why they make it virtually so impossible for people to leave. Can we start with that, Claire, and the issue of why is it so difficult to leave, and how does the issue of collateral play into that?
Yes, absolutely. I would say at the outset, it's important to understand that there are different levels of escaping from Scientology. So, for example, a civilian Scientologist who just, attends their local organization, many of those people can just drift away. They'll get phone calls or emails for years afterwards. But it's just important to understand that where I was working, the Sea organization, and then on top of that, at the headquarters on a 500-acre secure compound, it just, the deeper in you go, the harder it is to get out. I often think about it as like going into a skyscraper, and the further you go up, the harder it is to get out. It's a one-way trip. It's, or a spider web. The more you wriggle, the harder it is to get out, the more entrenched you become. And in Scientology, there's not only the aspect of the mental prison that you build up in your own mind after years and years, in my case, of indoctrination from the age of 4. But there's also the physical restrictions. There's a security force that monitors everybody's movements. Then there's the leverage aspect. my family is all in Scientology and remains in Scientology to this day. I had very little contact with the outside world. For many years, I never spoke with the family, the extended family I had that were outside Scientology. So again, it's a very small world. And as a result of that, it's very controlled, very leveraged, and very hard to get out. And even when you do get out, then, for example, in our case, I can't remember if we talked about this the last time, but I escaped, and my husband and I were both declared suppressive people. So we were given a document that says, you're hereby declared a suppressive person. You're not allowed to speak to anybody in Scientology anymore, including my family, of course, and my husband's family. And we were given freeloader bills. And we would be required to pay off those bills in full as a requirement if we were to ever go back into Scientology, which is the only means by which we would ever speak to our family ever again. And in our case, our bills were a cumulative total between the two of us of $159,000.
Wow. And explain to the listeners, we could touch on this briefly, but this was for training that was compulsory that you went through to reach the levels that you did in Scientology. So can you just talk us through that process? Because we also discussed last time that one, the courses and if you could give us a little bit of the overview about the level that you'd reached in Scientology and what was involved in getting there.
Yes, absolutely. I started Scientology training and courses when I was 6 years old. But then as a teenager, I did the counseling training. And again, they call it the bridge to total freedom. I call it the bridge to total nonsense, just a matter of perspective. But on the one side, so there's two sides to the bridge. The one side is the training courses where you learn how to administer Scientology counseling. The other side is the counseling. So, it starts off at the very bottom with, for example, the purification rundown, where you spend 5 hours in the sauna and you take up to a whole regimen of vitamins, including up to 5,000 milligrams of niacin every day until you don't have any reaction to it, to remove drugs from the fatty tissues in your body, though there's no medical or science that backs that up. Anyway, and then you go up you do counseling up to first up to the state of clear, where you're supposedly addressing and handling your reactive mind. And then above that are the upper levels that are referred to as the OT levels, or operating thetan levels, where you become, next level superpower. There's OT 1 to 15, but only OT 1 to 8 is actually available. Yeah. And I was in the middle of OT 5. And I was a class 4 auditor. And then, of course, on top of that, I had extensive management training and on Hubbard policies, not outside and not any actual, real world management. But yeah, so I was in the Sea organization for 14 years. And as part of that, being in the Sea organization, every member of the Sea organization is required to study 2.5 hours a day. So by a conservative estimate, I studied Hubbard policies, directives, databases of information, well in excess of 10,000 hours in the 30 years that I spent in Scientology. And that started at the age of 6, and then obviously never stopped during the time I spent in Scientology.
And that was absolutely the level that you got to, and also the level of sort of security clearance that you had, and the type of work that you were doing was instrumental in you being invited to be an expert witness in the Danny Masterson trial. So obviously we're on YouTube, so we have to be really careful with the words that we're allowed to say. But can you just explain to the listeners a little bit, because this is really, really crucial, I think, to understanding a lot of the workings of Scientology, what the Danny Masterson trial was about, and very crucially, your role in it, because this is the second trial that he'd been through.
Yes, absolutely. So there were 3 charges of SA on three different women. And in the first trial, there was the defense strategy started out never questioning that the events took place. Their strategy was different. But yes, I was first approached prior to the first trial by the prosecution and asked if I would be willing to testify as an expert witness, because of not only my knowledge of Scientology policy, procedure, et cetera, but also because I had, in the 14 years that I was in the Sea organization, I spent 8 of those years working for Religious Technology Center, which is the highest ecclesiastical organization in Scientology, run directly by David Miscavige. And for 4 of those years in Religious Technology Center, I was number 3. So I reported to Marty Rathbun, who reported to David Miscavige. So because of my position in the organization, and because of my knowledge, and because of my firsthand experiencing how crimes are covered up in Scientology, those are really the key elements as to why I was asked to testify. And of course, it's not that it was tough. It was not, nobody wants to go up against $1 billion cult just for the heck of it, but I never had any question. It was the right thing to do. It was very important. Scientology did play a huge role in those crimes, and obviously now a jury of Danny Masterson's peers have found him guilty of 2 of those charges, and the 3rd charge ended with a hung jury, and he was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years. And so my testimony, I didn't know the Jane Does. I knew of Danny Masterson. I don't know Danny Masterson. So my testimony had nothing to do with the facts of the specific charges. It had to do with my firsthand knowledge and experience with Scientology policy, procedure, and the language of Scientology, because there were reports presented and that were part of the prosecution's case that would just deeply involved the language and terminology of Scientology. So explaining that to the jury was the role that I played.
Yeah, and it was such a crucial role and absolutely vital to actually get those convictions. I can only imagine how difficult it must have been, but thank goodness. I think there's a real lesson there, Claire, isn't there, that you can't, when you know this information, not, as you say, not the specifics of the case, but let's delve into now why your knowledge of the procedures and policies. There were a couple of things from listening to you on your channel and Mark's interviews on other channels as well that really stood out for me. So can you explain, first of all, Scientology's view energetically of victims?
Yes, absolutely. So in Scientology, there is what's called the emotional tone scale. And it at the very bottom is minus 40.0, goes up to 0, which is body death. And at the top is 40.0, serenity of beingness. And in Scientology, the whole theory and concept is that Hubbard says, oh, well, with counseling and with training, you're going to move somebody up this emotional tone scale. And if somebody is succumbing or committing transgressions or not following the moral code of the group, then they are below 2.0, which is antagonism. And they are essentially, instead of surviving, they're succumbing. Victim is a tone level on that tone scale of 0.1. So just a notch above body death. And why that's significant is because essentially the whole structure of Scientology is that a Scientologist does not believe in victim, the concept of victim. And in fact, it's used as a slur in Scientology of, oh, stop being a victim. And in addition to that, Hubbard has what he referred to as the overt motivator sequence, which is if you do something, and then you now deserve to be the victim, to be the recipient of a crime, let's say. So in other words, the approach, it's, for all intents and purposes, to keep it real simple, it's victim shaming. So if I have somebody punches me in the face, let's say, that's a motivator. I've punched somebody else in the face, whether it be this lifetime or in earlier lifetimes, doesn't really matter. The way that Scientology is going to handle me being punched in the face and me saying, hey, Joe punched me in the face, this is not okay. They're going to be like, okay, what have you done like Joe? Who did you punch in the face? And it turns it on yourself to make you the cause of anything that happens to you. And it's very, it's just the mechanism of smoke and mirrors of, it all comes back to you. And even saying something, and it can get worse. So then let's say I say, no, Joe punched me in the face, this is not okay. Well, then I have to report that to the Scientology police officer, the equivalent, which is referred to as the ethics officer. And I have to write a knowledge report. And I have to report it to the ethics officer, whose job is to then investigate what I'm reporting. Well, if Joe is a Scientologist in good standing, then the ethics officer is instructed by L. Ron Hubbard to file that report, quote, with a yawn, unquote. So if Joe is a good Scientologist and donating lots of money and doing his thing, no consequences. If I then continue to make a stink about it, I can be put under a gag order. And that happened with one of the Jane Does.
Yeah.
The term in Scientology is a non-interpolation order. By mechanism and by fact, that is a gag order. So now I'm no longer allowed to say anything about Joe. Otherwise, I'll get kicked out, lose my family, lose my job, have my kid taken out of daycare, whatever, all the on and on and on. And I'll be subject to the practice of fair game, which means that Scientology can viciously attack, harass, stalk, lie about, on and on and on, with the intended result of muzzling me, silencing me, destroying me.
It's so horrific. There's so much I want to unpack here, because the victim shaming is absolutely horrendous. And we do see some parallels with this in the sort of spiritual community, where we've got this concept that, we attract everything into our lives. And so you can see some parallels there. But this was so instrumental in the case, actually, in his conviction in the end, because your evidence was explaining why the victims hadn't gone initially to the outside police. Is that correct? So could you explain, what is it, how do Scientology view the legal system, the law enforcement system, and the restrictions as a high ranking member of Scientology, that you would not be allowed to go to those had a crime been committed?
Yes, absolutely. It is policy in Scientology that if a crime is committed by one from between two Scientologists, it is dealt with entirely with and in Scientology. It is reported to the ethics officer, which is the Scientology police officer. It's their responsibility to report that to the Office of Special Affairs, which is the organization that does all the handles all the private investigators, legal, public relations of the church, so of Scientology. So it's not only there's layers to it. There's complete disdain in many policies by L. Ron Hubbard of the judicial system, of government agencies, of the police. And keep in mind, historically, this goes back to the 70s, where Office of Special Affairs was called the Guardian's Office. And Scientology was convicted in the late 70s of the largest infiltration of U.S. government in its history. And 12 Scientologists, including L. Ron Hubbard's wife, Mary Sue Hubbard, went to jail.
Wow. I don't know how I didn't know that. That is absolutely incredible. And I think this is, you can imagine the the bravery of these victims in the Danny Mastersons to actually have the courage with all these awful things, that, you know, the gagging orders, the fact that nothing was done about it when they reported it. And of course, these are just the people that we know about. It's absolutely horrendous. It's disgusting. And I think this is so relevant for people to see what sort of organization would effectively cover up such horrendous crimes going on. And if those of you, we can't really go into detail about exactly what happened, but you can find that anywhere by searching yourself, because unfortunately we're not allowed to use some of this terminology on YouTube. So I mean, when you actually leave Scientology as a high up member of yourself, or if you're, say, a victim that has, so one of the Jane Does did report out to the external police, is my understanding, and then got into a lot of trouble for doing that. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. I would encourage, and first of all, sorry, just to finish on the Guardian's office and the people that went to jail, I would encourage anyone to just Google Operation Snow White. And that gives all the information, all the documentation on Mike Render's blog. He has extensive documentation of that. And it's just part of the history. Scientology has been getting away with this for 7 decades. So unfortunately, the situation with the Jane Does is not isolated at all. There were many similar crimes that I knew of that were covered up, and that was just the practice of Scientology. No Scientologist ever thinks to call 911. And as we talked about, I didn't even think to call 911 when they were trying to kidnap me and bring me back. You know, it just never would have crossed my mind. In Scientology, the laws and policies and directives of L. Ron Hubbard trump the laws of any country. A Scientologist will follow policy above anything else, period. End of story.
Yeah. Now, it's just horrific, and it's absolutely amazing that justice to a large extent has been served, albeit very, very late in the day, and so many people have spent years actually having to go through this. As you say, this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I did see Mark, I think it was yesterday or the day before, on Growing Up with Scientology, obviously brilliant channel, talking about some of the other cases that you guys were aware of. This is just the tip of the iceberg. As you say, there's so many different levels of crimes that have been covered up. What are your thoughts, Claire? Do you think some of these now are going to start to be exposed?
I absolutely believe that, yes, this is just the beginning. Yeah. And if nothing else, the public awareness is increasing by the day. And I hope this gives the other victims courage to come forward. But we already know of, you know, we're already helping some other victims come forward. So I absolutely know this is just the beginning. And I just applaud, you know, the Jane Does for their tenacity, courage, perseverance. I mean, I cannot even imagine, you know, imagine testifying to brutal incidents that happened to you, not only once, but twice. And a big part of the reason why the jury was hung the first time, in my opinion, had to do with the fact that in the first trial, again, because of the defense strategy, like the defense was not saying, oh, we're not going to say these things didn't happen. But during the course of that first trial, they changed that and started to question, well, we're you know, they just changed their strategy to start to question if these things ever happened, which brought Scientology into it, which is why then in the second trial, the judge said, no, yes, Claire Headley, go ahead and testify and give your expert witness testimony, because of the reports that the prosecution had that had been turned into Scientology at the time the incidents took place.
Yeah, I mean, the cover-up is just absolutely beyond disgusting. And it's like anything, you know, how many other victims needn't have been victims had this been brought to light when it should have been. Absolutely horrendous. And say the courage of those Jane Does and anyone who has got the courage to really take this forward is just amazing, because it's the only way these monsters get stopped.
Right.
Now there's been a lot of hoo-ha because some of the stuff that was released at the trials were the witness sort of statements and letters from people like Ashton Kutcher and his wife, what's she called, Mila Kunis.
Yeah, Mila Kunis.
Yeah,
Yep.
I'm hopeless with anyone who's a supposed celebrity. I wouldn't recognize them if they were standing next to me. But I think I was delighted when I saw this, Claire. I really want to know how you feel, because to me, this was exactly like the hornet's nest has been opened and now we're going to see a lot tumbling down. Talk us through, for those people that haven't seen that, what the excitement is about this and the backlash that's happened all over social media. I just wanted to say that today's episode is sponsored by Asea redox signaling molecules. Now, it comes in two forms, the liquid and the gel, plus there's a huge other product range for us. But why did I start taking Asea, and why is it now an integral part of something that my whole family, both four-legged and two-legged, take every single day? Plus also something that all the clients I work with, again, four-legged and two-legged, it's number one on my priority list. Well, part of what I do, what I'm passionate about, is understanding the challenges that are affecting each and every one of us in today's modern living. The more you know, the more sometimes you wish you didn't know, but the pollution in the air, in the water, in the food, the control of our minds, the propaganda. But one of the things that we can do is take back responsibility for our own health. Now, every single cell of our body, whether we're an animal, whether we're one of the dogs in the backgrounds or one of my plants, contain these redox signaling molecules, and cellular health and cellular communication is absolutely key, whether you want to get your body back in balance, whether you want to reverse the aging process, whether you want to address any particular challenges that you've got physically, emotionally. It all starts with healthy cells. If your liver cells are healthy, your liver's healthy. If your brain cells are healthy, your brain's healthy. But just like a mobile phone, most of us have got mobile phones that we use on a routine basis now, but that mobile phone, regardless of whether you've got the latest model, is completely useless without a signal. So what does this technology do? The gel is something that you can apply topically over particular areas of concern, whether you want your skin to look better, whether you've got a cellulite, whether you've got an area that's causing you a challenge. The liquid is something you drink each and every day to top up what should be in your cells anyway. But when our bodies are stressed, diseased, challenged, or as we age, we make less of them. So personally, I wouldn't be without it. My sleep's better, my energy levels are better, my mood's better, my mobility's better. If you want to find out more, the details are below. But I'm so grateful that this came into my life, and I'm so grateful I can share it with others. I hope you love it as much as I do. Let me know.
Yes, no, absolutely. And I will say, by the way, too, before I forget, the victim impact statements from the Jane Does are available online. I really recommend people read those. Also on Leah Remini's Substack, she released a letter that Jane Doe 1's mother wrote to David Miscavige, the head of Scientology, demanding that Danny Masterson be held accountable and brought to justice for the crimes he committed against her daughter. Anyway, but yes, no. So essentially, Danny Masterson's, I suppose, his defense, and maybe also the family, asked for letters of character letters, I think they're called, to be submitted to Judge Charlene Olmedo prior to his sentencing. And there are, I think I heard that there were 50 letters. I haven't seen all of them, but yes, over at growing up in Scientology and other places too, Ashton Kutcher's letter and Mila Kunis's letter were disclosed.
Yeah.
And, boy, you want to judge somebody by their actions, go read that letter and see what you think about Ashton Kutcher after that. Danny Masterson has been found guilty by a jury of his peers, and the letters are just outrageous. I mean, And then on top of that, it's, as you said, it's just become this hornet's nest of, then Ashton and Mila did an apology video that literally looks like a prisoner of war video.
It
that
really
with
does. I've
no
got
remorse.
that. No remorse.
Yes.
Complete disrespect, considering they're both top actors. It was, well, a body language expert would have an absolute field day. There were a lot of, in my opinion, a lot of hidden messages in there. And anyone, please go and watch those on the internet, because the language that Ashton Kutcher used was just ridiculous as well. I mean, there's so many deep dives that could be done into this. And why? Do you think that they've got collateral on him? Because it's very, very odd.
I do. And I don't have personal knowledge of it, but I know Aaron at Growing Up in Scientology has done a number of videos about this since this hornet's nest has exploded. But there's a lot of information regarding Ashton, actually, and a conversation that happened between Ashton and Danny Masterson. I don't want to speak out of place, but in summary, Ashton was dating a woman that was murdered by a serial killer. Ashton went to her house, found her dead, and left, and didn't report it to the police. I mean, and then that serial killer went on to kill other victims. It's just like, what human being does this? This is not normal behavior.
This is exactly it. When you start, this is why I think the ramifications of this trial are huge, absolutely huge. I mean, for those people that are in the more disclosure community, there have been a lot of rumors circulating about the behavior of Ashton Kutcher in loads of different ways, and none of them complimentary, I might add. Again, can't say too much on here. But when you start unpeeling the layers of this and the behavior patterns and the friendship groups and who's involved with what, it is really quite scary. And I think my personal feeling, not knowing any of the inside things, is this is going to really explode into a huge, huge web of disclosure.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, people do need to be held accountable for their actions. You can't just, you just can't, especially not as a public opinion leader, a public figure. This is the same reason why I publicly posted regarding Tom Cruise. He supports $1 billion cult that abuses and destroys people's lives. And that, how are people not how is this okay in this day and age? It's not.
It's really not. And the double standards are unbelievable. And when you're as high up in the organization as Tom Cruise, and in fact, most of the celebrities, actually, I would imagine, you can't pretend ignorance. They know exactly what's going on, and it's a deliberate choice. Although this does tie into a lot of other disclosures, particularly around the entertainment industry, and wondering how much this collateral does play into a lot of these behaviors. Because without a shadow of a doubt, can you explain how Scientology collects collateral on people?
Yes, absolutely. Well, and of course, for celebrities, Scientology has a very targeted strategy by L. Ron Hubbard to bring in celebrities to celebrity centers. The biggest one, of course, is in Hollywood. And they are, celebrities are just cushioned, essentially. And, not that they're not, I wouldn't say it's true that all celebrities in Scientology are aware of David Miscavige's physical abuse of staff, for example. Tom Cruise definitely is. Tom Cruise is best friends with David Miscavige, at least he was when I was there. And that's what led to Shelley Miscavige doing a project to get Tom Cruise a wife, which she told me about personally. But in terms of collateral, In Scientology, they have, not obviously, in any counseling session, every word the person says is written down. Reports are written. Reports are kept in the person's ethics folder, their counseling folder. And if there's any kind of mishap or anything, any handlings being done, then reports of what's being done with that celebrity, what's going on, are sent to David Miscavige in Religious Technology Center. They're sent to the Office of Special Affairs. Like, in other words, if there's one thing Scientology is very good at, it's paper trail documentation. And that's what they do. So, for example, you look at the hate sites that they've put up on anyone who dares leave Scientology and speak out. They're using all that, anything that the person ever confessed to or admitted to, whether it be in a counseling session that Scientology will tell you, oh no, we can't tell you what this Scientologist did because that's priest penitent information. But the moment that person walks out the door or escapes, they're fair game. Bring it all out. Let's put it all out there for everyone to see and use it against the person.
Yeah, which is unbelievably hypocritical, particularly what you've described to us about, I can't remember the name of it, but the energetic scale where victim is just above a dead body,
Yes.
to actually be deliberately behaving like that. But that paper trail could well be their downfall, and it certainly was for Danny Masterson in this case once that evidence was allowed to be submitted. So tell us.
And that wouldn't be the first time either.
Yeah.
When the FBI raided several Scientology centers in the 70s, their paper trail is what resulted in 12 people going to jail.
Yeah. Let's hope.
Yeah.
So when someone, and there's quite a few of you that have been brave enough to sort of speak out and really spill the beans about the abuse and the practices that do go on, you and Mark, since you've left, what sort of, with people with your level of knowledge, because you were very, very high up in the organisation, Claire, what sort of abuse have you guys suffered since you've left, and how on earth do you cope with that?
Yeah. I won't lie. I was terrified when I first escaped. Even when Mark first started speaking out on the internet, I was besides myself, because I know full well what Scientology is capable of. But even starting in 2006, when Mark had started posting on the internet before I'd ever spoken out publicly, they had private investigators following us. They had somebody walking by our house every day. They were doing special trash collections to take our garbage and go through it. They were getting our phone records. They had people pretending to be friends and coming to birthday parties and then rifling through our office and going through our stuff and reporting on everyone we were talking to. And by the way, we have the internal documents that show all of this that they were doing. Mark has started doing a series on our YouTube channel called The Spy Files, in which he's putting up and discussing these internal memorandums, if you will, that we now have that show that they were doing all these things. So it's not, I'm not exaggerating. If anything, I'm understating the levels that they went to. These are just the things that we know for sure. But, anyway, Mark has talked about it.
Please do, anyone, go to Claire and Marc's channel. Obviously, the link will be below because there's so much information on there and it's really, really valuable. I'll explain a bit more about that in a minute. Carry on, Claire.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so we've just, it's been such a practice for so long against us. Even as of February this year, Scientology sent letters to all of Mark's clients, with ironically a picture that one of their spies had taken of Mark at his birthday party in May 2005, passed out drunk on Hollywood Boulevard. And in 2012, I want to say, this person came to Mark and said, hey, I saw you're writing a second book and that you're going to talk about how I was spying for Scientology. You don't want this photo to leak out, do you? Like trying to blackmail him. So of course, Marc turned around and posted it on social media.
Yeah.
You know, what are
If
you going to
that's the
say?
worst they've got, then he's doing pretty damn well, for goodness sake. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, it was his first birthday party out of the Sea organization. Come on now, really?
Yeah, completely. Yeah, I'm always very grateful to be the age I am when no one had mobile phones when I was growing up, because no evidence of anything. So I hope. But in all seriousness, we're laughing, but it must have been and still is horrendous for you. How have you as a family managed to cope with that?
Yeah, no, it is. And I'm not making light of it either.
Mm-hmm.
It's, it's not for the faint of heart. It's sad. It's sad that we've just adjusted to account for this. Like, for example, when Marc wrote his book, we opted to self-publish because other books at that time, this was in 2009, other books at that time that went through a publisher had been shut down by Scientology's lawyers. They have such a litigious reputation, very validly so. And anyway, I took the stance that, we each have a path of recovery we need to go on. Even prior to me speaking out, I supported Marc, and I'm like, I know, yes, we witnessed abuses and I'm terrified, but I'm not going to tell you, you can't. That's not for me to say. And it does need a exposure. It does need a light shone on this. Otherwise they're going to continue to get away with it. But so, for example, when we released his book, we first wrote wills. Yeah. We set up everything so that if anything did happen to us, our children would be protected from Scientology, that our family would never have access to them, and it sounds terrible to say that, but it's the truth. Yeah. You can't, we've just had to put things in place so that we know we're taking responsible and appropriate measures, knowing the beast that we are up against.
Yeah. I mean, in a world where so many people want to bury their heads in the sand because it's too overwhelming, all the different problems that they're faced with, it is incredibly brave what you have done, both of you. It must be such a support that you've both had this shared experience.
Yes. I mean, I think some days it's a blessing, some days it's a curse.
Yeah.
But yes, of course, I'm incredibly grateful that our marriage has survived and that we've been on this path together.
Yeah. Again, we covered a lot of that for people. Please go and listen to the first interview, because relationships are not encouraged to flourish in Scientology. That's an understatement of the year. So what next for you and Marc, and what you're trying to do? Because this work that you're actually doing, can you tell us a little bit about the work you do with the Aftermath Foundation?
Yes, absolutely. The aftermathfoundation.org is the website. And I'm currently serving as the president. Marc is a board member, and we help people start their lives over again after leaving Scientology and or the Sea organization, because very often the world of Scientology is so isolating on so many levels. So, for example, we helped someone learn to drive, got her a vehicle, another person, we help them get their GED. We have a career mentor program where we help people figure out what they want to do with their lives and build resumes and, help them get the skills that they need. And, and we have a mental health coordinator now who helps point people in direction of mental health resources so they can recover. So, it's amazing and very necessary work. just in helping people get out of Scientology. And honestly, for me, just speaking personally, it's just so therapeutic to be able to help somebody get out of a situation like we were in. There's no better way to fix or to work to fix, the terrible organization we were a part of for so many years than to do this work. And all the board members serve on a volunteer basis. And we're just gaining momentum, and it's a beautiful thing.
It's absolutely amazing. I was watching, doing some research on the blue zones and the areas of the world where people live the longest, but most importantly, live the longest in a happy and healthy way. And one of the things they came across, a Japanese word, ikigai, which is a sense of purpose, a reason for being. And you've really found yours, it sounds like.
Yeah, no, it's good. And, it's the beautiful thing too, is that as our kids have grown older, we've always approached the topic with our kids in an age appropriate way. I was encouraged when they were very little to just not lie to them about, but just to tell them the truth about who we are and where we came from. And, why, if they ask why my mom is not in their lives, for example.
Yeah.
And, it's sad. Like when my oldest son was 7, one day out of the blue, he turned to me and said, "Mom, when did your mom die?" I'm like, "Son, she's not dead. She is part of, an organization that refuses to let her have any contact with me. And unfortunately, that's not unconditional love. And hopefully one day she wakes up and she will talk to us again." But so, having to explain that to a 7-year-old it can be hard, or anyway, so it's just a balance of, finding peace and explaining to our kids who we are, where we came from, why we do what we do. They've met some of the people that we've helped to escape, and they love it. And I think it's a beautiful thing to model, that to our children, that, you just help people, just no questions asked, no strings attached, just help them start their lives over and make the world a better place. That's my hope and my goal.
Oh, it's just the best goal ever, Claire, because this is the thing, is so many people are caught in a loop of shame, of guilt, of feeling completely disempowered. And you and Marc have completely had to rebuild your lives from scratch. I mean, where did you even begin in that process? I just can't imagine.
Well, and I will say it's been a complete joy to do that. Yes, we started with the clothes on our back at age 30, for me anyway. Marc was 32. $40 to my name. Very little resources, but, I mean, we just went at it. And I cannot emphasize how much, people will sometimes say to us, "Well, how are you so normal?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? I'm building the only life I ever dreamed of." Yeah. Every day is a free day for me to decide what I want to do today and what I want to accomplish, with nothing handed to me on a silver platter, no expectations other than what I make it. And so it's been an amazing journey. And I just, again, would just always encourage people to know that, you can accomplish whatever you set your mind to. Absolutely. Maybe, yes, we've worked really hard, and I used to think that I kind of had a mental struggle, and I was like, well, is the work ethic that I have from that? But then a friend of mine, we were talking about it one day, and because, yes, of course, we worked very, very long hours. And in my case, doing honestly useless stuff that in Scientology, not useless. I mean, it's management within Scientology. But what I mean by that is it doesn't translate to any real world skill that I would be able to put on a resume. I would joke with people like, "Hi, I'm Claire. Yes, please hire me. I was in a cult for 30 years, but I'll work really hard, I promise. But so anyway, I lost my train of thought there, but we just
The
I
belief
went.
that you've done it, and it's not just belief, it's again so much. Whenever I speak to you, and I've listened to a lot of the stuff that you and Mark do on your channel, it's just brilliant. But the overriding thing that just keeps coming back to me, Claire, is just such amazing examples of what can be achieved with gratitude. You've said it so many times about, I'm just grateful for the fact that we're free now and that we can create the lives we want. And you have done a most remarkable job. I mean, building that life and raising 3 children, we all know that's not easy by any stretch of the imagination. So fantastic achievement. Have you thought about doing work, or do you do work with younger people as well? Because a lot of the younger generations now just do not have role models like this to show them what's possible.
Yes, I have. In fact, prior to COVID, I had drafted a TED Talk about growing up in a cult, not just about growing up in a cult, but just about, the perspective of a child, and not, just don't take anything for granted, and don't wait for somebody to start your life. There's nobody else that's going to do it other than you and your own bootstraps. But yeah, so, and I actually did the draft of the TED Talk on our YouTube channel as well. I never ended up actually doing it, because then of course COVID hit and things shut down, and I just never went back to it. But I did do it at one of our local high schools. And it was amazing. The kids, as teenagers, I think they were juniors, and they asked such amazing questions. It was just a beautiful experience. And I was really encouraged by their understanding and their willingness to hear what I had to say and ask meaningful questions, and like, wow, what about this? And what about this? Anyway, it was an amazing experience. Yeah.
Oh, good for you. Can you send me the link, and I can put it below this video for the one on your channel? Because I really think it's so important, because there's so many people that are feeling lost. They don't know what their purpose is, overwhelmed by what they're seeing going on in the world, but not really knowing how to do something about it. And you've just got on and done it, and you're still getting on and doing it, and you're creating, but you're helping so much. And the stuff that you show on your YouTube channel, there's so many lessons in it, Claire, for so many people. It's not just for people that have been in cults by any stretch of the imagination. There's so much that people can take that out in terms of what's happening in their own lives, and what lessons they can learn from that.
Yes, no, absolutely. And honestly, that has been one of the most encouraging things. Is, there's a in the SPTV community that's sprung up and is just blossoming. There's the category of people we refer to as never ends, or actually they refer to themselves as never ends. And it just, the concept of somebody who is watching and learning, but they were never in Scientology. And honestly, that category of person most motivated me to speak out. And it started way back in the days when Anonymous was protesting Scientology, because it just struck me like, wow, these people have no skin in the game. They're not, they were never in Scientology, and yet they're willing to stand up and say, hey, this is not okay. And I was like, who am I to be afraid and cowering and, and not lend my voice to share my experiences and my knowledge? I was just literally humbled by it. And anyway, it was really moving. And we received so many messages from people in the category of what you're saying that are like, oh, I'm learning so much, and this is really helping. And it's deeply moving. It really is.
Absolutely brilliant. So how can people support you and your work and the Aftermath Foundation?
Yes. So the aftermathfoundation.org is our website. We just redid it. So it's got a lot of resources on there now, a lot of information. People can donate, volunteer, contact us through there. And then separate to that, we have our YouTube channel, Blown for Good. Blownforgood.com is where we sell Marc's book, Blown for Good, Behind the Iron Curtain of Scientology. I'm in progress on my book now, so I'm hoping by early next year I'll have that come to fruition. Finally, it's a work in progress. So I'm getting there.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm really, really grateful for your time, Claire. I love speaking to you. I always feel so uplifted, whatever platform I'm watching you on. And anyone that's watching this, please do go and have a look at the Art of My Own Foundation. Please do consider contributing in whatever way you can, because this is so important. This is how we play it forward, and this is how we really change the world one person at a time. These people really, really need the help and support, and it would mean the absolute world for them to have people that show that they care. So thank you so much, Claire, for your work. Such a pleasure. Have a fantastic—
Such a pleasure. I really appreciate you having me on. I always thoroughly enjoy our conversation, so I just appreciate it.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you so much for everyone that's watched with us. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. And if you feel inspired, please do share with your friends and family. My goal is to inspire as many people as I can to live their best lives, to stay curious, and to raise their consciousness and that of the collective. So to do this, I need to reach as many people as possible, and this needs your help. If you feel drawn, would you be willing to share your favourite episode with 5 different people? This helps us spread the word and also helps me encourage some exciting new guests to take part in this podcast. If you feel drawn to do that, I will be very, very grateful. All the links and discount codes where applicable for all the products that I support are on my 2 websites, catherineedwards.life and catherineedwardsacademy.com. All of the products are personally tried and tested by me, my family, and my clients. And finally, please do press the follow or subscribe button, depending which platform you're listening on. And above all, stay curious and stay free.